it's critical blast.
Sci-Fi for Me is about to take you on an incredible journey into the realms of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Interviews with writers, filmmakers, artists, and actors. Conventions and fandom. Previews and reviews of movies and television. Sci-Fi for Me is working to be the most popular science fiction magazine in the solar system. Subscribe now and enter the fantastic world of Sci-Fi for Me, delivering the multiverse since 2009.
There we are. All right. Because my computer has reset itself in between when the last time we did this and now, and so all of the default settings for the audio disappeared. So I just now brought everything back. Hello everybody and welcome. We are live. This is the Blast from the Bunker. My name is Jason Hunt. I am the editor here at Sci-Fi for Me, and oh, yeah. Okay, hold on. There we go. All right, now we've got the right audio on. We'll get through this. We'll make it. We're getting there. We're getting there. I had the setting in the wrong setting, and now audio is there, and it should be there. So, yes, my name is Jason Hunt. I'm in Sci-Fi for Me. That's R.J. Carter over there on the screen left with Critical Blast, and in the middle, our guest. Now that we've gone through all of that, our guest for the evening, filmmaker Timothy Stevens. He joins us. He is the director of the new film, The Ghost Lights. So, Timothy, welcome. Oh, wait, hang on, let me turn that on.
I want to believe that.
So, welcome, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
So, this is the third time that we've done this. So we're still, every now and again the bugs will creep in a little bit, but we do appreciate you taking time to talk to us, sir.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
So, take me through the Reader's Digest synopsis here. What is the Ghost Lights about?
Yeah. So the story centers around a young woman named Alex. She is from Dallas, and she moves off to New York City to follow her dreams of being a big city journalist. And she comes back home after the death of her father, who was also a journalist. And while looking through a box of his old things in his now mostly empty house, she finds this strange tape labeled The Ghost Lights, October 15th, 1978. And as she listens to this tape, she hears this interview with this gentleman who had a very traumatic close encounter and with these lights out in far west Texas. So she sets out on a cross-state road trip to discover the truth. While listening to these tapes and kind of uncovering the story, and she's trying to kind of turn it into a story for the magazine that she's working for, but it's also about connecting with the memory of her father. And as she does this, some weird things start to happen, and that's we can talk more about that if you want to get to it, but that's kind of where the sci-fi elements come in, is strange stuff begins to pursue her while she pursues the story.
So the mysterious lights, the first thing that I thought of, given that this is happening in West Texas, is the Marfa lights.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% the inspiration for this film.
So did you go out to West Texas and talk to people, or at least talk to people in West Texas? Maybe you didn't go out there, but well, yeah, I would assume you probably went out there to shoot. But did you? How much research into the Marfa lights went into this? Is it a key critical component?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really how all this started, two things. In 2018, I went out to Terlingua, which is this cool mining ghost town that is right on the edge of the Big Bend State Park out in West Texas.
Yeah.
And I was so captivated by the area, and I kind of heard about the Marfa lights while I was out there. So I knew I wanted to put a film there. I just didn't really know what. And then I think it was 2019, I was in development for a paranormal travel show, kind of like, imagine like Destination Unknown with aliens or with ghosts. That's basically what it was. And ultimately that TV show never came to fruition, but as part of that, I did a bunch of research, and I talked to, there's a big long history of the Marfa lights that stretches back 150 years, even a little bit longer. And so I talked to the relatives of like the first people that saw the lights in like the 1890s. And it kind of led me down this rabbit hole. And eventually I spoke to this one guy that, actually two guys, that said that they had a close encounter with the Marfa lights, and which is unique because most people see them at a distance, at a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles away. They never come close. And they had a close, well, they claim that they had a close-up encounter, and it was very traumatic. And whatever you may believe about the phenomena, this guy I talked to was very hesitant to speak to me. He had every reason to try to turn this into like a cash cow. We didn't really have a lot of money for him, but we probably were going to pay him something. Yeah. It took a lot of like talking to get him to share his story. And I was so affected by that, the next year when it came around and I was looking for my first narrative feature, all of this kind of collided. And, the Ghost Lights is not technically based on true events, but we took a lot of stuff that guy told me and put it directly into the film. As well as like the history of the Big Bend and some of the weird stuff that happens out there. It's an odd corner of the universe,
Yeah.
Now, would you say that your story is more of a sci-fi story, a horror story, or a day in the life story that just happens to involve a supernatural and or sci-fi element?
Yeah, I mean, probably the last one is probably a pretty good description. We're calling it a sci-fi thriller. There's elements of horror in it because I do consider myself to be a horror film director. But it is at the base level, it's a family story. It's a story about regret. It's a story about trying to make amends in almost an impossible way, like after the fact, after the death of her father, she's trying to make amends. But it's got a lot of like kind of sci-fi wrappings around it. A lot of my personal interest in paranormal and this kind of leans towards like the high strangeness, John Keel, Mothman, Prophecies side of things, which all of that again is kind of inspiration for the kind of the bed of this story.
Is there? You mentioned you're a horror filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at something like this, and the mystery of the Marfa lights and the supernatural and the UFOs, and we don't know what they are, and they could be anything from swamp gas coming off the oil fields to reflections and St. Elmo's fire. I mean, there's been all sorts of different explanations for what these things are.
Plasma.
Yeah, it's
all kinds of stuff.
how
because they're. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, RJ.
Like I say, they seem to be ground level lights, not lights in the sky. Usually, which being a ground level light, I would be. If I were out there, it's like, there's weird lights out there. Hop in the car, let's go.
Well, and people have done that, in the 40s during the war. There was actually, I'm trying to recall the guy's name. I spoke to some of his living relatives. It's like a German name, but he was a fighter pilot. Well, he was teaching people to fly because they had Marfa Army Air Base out there at the time, and he tried to chase the lights because he was convinced they were Germans coming over the border, and he almost ran himself into the side of a mountain because of it. And there's this, the very first sighting of the Marfa lights happened in like 1890s, and this cowboy was out there on a cattle drive, and he had a couple of buddies with him, and they're sitting out by the campfire, and they see what appears to be Indian fires, so like Apache fires, except that they are moving towards him, which didn't make sense. So they actually pursued these things a little bit, and they always seem to keep like the same distance away. So yeah, it's weird. It's like you could try to chase them, but it doesn't seem to work out. The people that have had a close encounter were not trying to have a close encounter. It just kind of zapped upon them.
Well, and the other thing,
it scared the hell out of them.
30 some odd years ago. Yeah, wow. Yeah, 30 plus years ago now.
Old, Jason.
I know. I had the occasion. We were doing a series of video projects about Route 66, and Route 66 comes through there, and you have the Marfa lights as this thing that suddenly, we were doing all of our research for all these different things. It's like, well, what is this out here in West Texas? And we talked to some people in Marfa, and had gotten some of the background on this, and the behavior of these lights, like you're talking about. Yeah, it's some of them, they're moving. Some of them split. They come together. They circle. They do all these weird things, and
yeah.
You could say maybe a few of them kind of behave like aircraft, or weather balloons or whatever, or St. Elmo's fire, or, lightning balls or plasma gas or whatever. But it's so inconsistent. There's not any, as far as I can remember, there's no real discernible pattern that would indicate that this is a particular thing. It's a bunch of lot of different things, and it really doesn't even really seem to indicate that there's any kind of intelligence behind it either. It's completely random, and there's no predicting when they're going to show up or how long they're going to be out there, and it's just this weird thing that nobody can explain. Although, plenty of people come up with various different stories, and I guess it's good fodder for spooky stories, and
yeah, I mean, as a writer, that's gold. Being able to say, like, we don't know what these are.
Yeah.
They could be anything, and if we don't know what they are and they could be anything, then I can come up with something pretty crazy as an explanation. It's just as valid as anything else. But I think the interesting thing about this story is that there's a lot of layers to it. And if someone were to go watch the film and find themselves like really compelled by this, there's like a mountain of material that is underneath everything. So you can, it's kind of what I do, and kind of what the characters in the film do, is that they become sort of obsessed with the lore of the lights, and that becomes almost like a magnetic thing that draws you into it. You become obsessed, and then you start reading more and more and more, and then suddenly all you can think about are the lights. And that's sort of what happens to both Alex's father in the film and herself. They become hooked almost magnetically into the strange gravitational pull of the ghost lights.
Oh. It's a fascinating subject. I mean, it's real easy to get sucked into this kind of thing. I mean, people talk about social media rabbit holes, but this kind of thing has been drawing people in and creating these little bubbles of interest for, like you said, since the late 1800s. People have done this. I mean, this is on the same order as stuff like the Roswell aliens, or go out to Devil's Tower or whatever. And I like the idea, and I haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, but this notion that it's a personal story between this girl and her father, and tried to figure this part out, as opposed to this giant epic ensemble, all of these, the world, the fate of the world is at stake, and all of this. The fact that it's a personal story, to me, I think, kind of gives it a little bit more emotional drive, because now you can focus and drill down on just this one aspect of things. And actually, from a horror standpoint, I would expect that you'd probably be able to play with that a little bit more, because the emotional intensity is kind of packed in there with just a few characters, and you can get a little bit more intense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And those are the kind of films that I love. I mean, everyone loves a big epic, right? Number one, that's impractical on a indie film scale, of course, but also the films that I really enjoy are human stories, and they're human stories that are kind of wrapped up in this like horror package, and there's something about whether it's sci-fi or horror. You mentioned Doctor Who earlier. There's some scary episodes of Doctor Who, right? Like I think like the angels, what it does is it kind of sugarcoats the bitter pill of like what we're actually talking about. In the case of Doctor Who, there's a lot of themes about taking care of your planet, and the meaning of time, and that's something that we play around with in the Ghost Lights is, what is time, and then also not letting time slip away from you. And so, not to like make people think that this is like a preach fest in the film, but I think a good horror film, a good sci-fi film, has kind of a bitter pill underneath that we're all supposed to, absorb, and it makes it a lot more palatable if we can wrap it in UFOs and time warps and alternate universes and all that. The like Star Trek, the best science fiction teaches us something about ourselves.
I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that this was out near Marfa military base, and that got me to initially thinking how many sightings actually occur near military bases. Obviously the Groom Lake springs to mind real quickly, Area 51. But then you said that these had been appearing since 1851. So now I'm like, the writer in me is like, I'm always hooking on to conspiracy theories because they make such great stories.
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah. You found here, right? So now, like, I'm wondering, do we build military bases where things are already happening because that's what we're there for?
That's interesting idea. Well, so the guy that I spoke with who had the close encounter, I asked him that question. I was like, why Marfa? And he's a local. His family has been there for probably 100 years, and he talked about how that entire area is a ancient lake bed, and that being said, a lot of that water still exists in the in the ground. There's just big underground water reservoir, from basically prehistoric oceans that has settled down there. And his working theory is that that has something to do with like this cosmic energy that's being generated. He also, I mean, his stuff started to get pretty out there. He thinks that it might have something to do with oh crap, what's the name of the rogue angels in the Apocrypha, the Nephilim.
The Nephilim,
So
yeah.
he dropped the Nephilim, and he was like, he goes, in the ancient, well, in the Hebrew text, there's this mention of the ancient wells of the deep, these deep places in the earth, to which the Nephilim were basically banished after they betrayed God. And he thinks that Marfa is sitting on the almost like a hellmouth sort of thing, like the wells of the deep, or in the Nephilim one day will rise out of this, and that the lights are merely like the physical phenomena generated. Now that's way beyond the scale of something we could address in a maybe even a movie. That's almost like a television show, but
Right.
I don't know. It's hard to say, but you do wonder. Do the air bases draw the attention of the UFOs, or the UFOs just already there, and maybe these things, I don't know. Maybe they psychically attract themselves to us. Who knows? I don't know. That starts to get into like some crazy far out theories, of which are not provable, but very fun to think about.
Well, like you said, that gives you fodder for a new story.
Oh, I know. Yeah, man. Even as I'm talking, I'm like, Nephilim. Ooh, that's cool.
Well, yeah, when you're coming up with something like this, you're out there, you start hearing about the lights, you come up with this notion. You've got this journalist, she finds the tape, you got the interviews, and that sort of thing. When you're looking at this now as a filmmaker, and like you said, your limited budget, your resources are what they are, and this is all you have that you've got to work with. How does that shape what kind of story you wanted to tell? I mean, you have your initial idea, and now, okay, well, I want it to be X, but my resources are such that maybe now it's going to be X minus N a little bit. It's going to be here. Did you have to make a lot of adjustments from your initial idea to the final form?
No, not really. I mean, I in the past I've written stories for the sake of it, which is great. That's a great exercise as a screenwriter, to just give yourself total freedom to just write, right?
Yep.
But after doing several of those, probably 4 or 5, doing budgets for those things, and then figuring out that $3 million film is not practical for a first time movie, I kind of adjusted myself to like write for a budget. So this whole idea really generated around like my business partner and I, John Francis McCullough, who's also co-producer and also plays the father in the film. We were just desperate to make a movie. We've been waiting on someone to like put this in our lap for it, trying to get investors for years. And 2020 came around, and it just kind of looked like the end of it all. And we were like, like hell, we're gonna go down without making our movie. We don't know what's happening. If it's the apocalypse, we're going to make a movie, which is kind of funny to say out loud, but thankfully it wasn't. But we did write the story, and we came up with the scope of the story was something that was very achievable for us. So I don't feel like we had to sacrifice it all. Obviously the Ghost Lights with $1 million budget would have been a different movie. But we didn't have $1 million. We had about $7,000. So I wrote a script that feels big. We end up in the big landscapes of West Texas with these huge sweeping vistas and sunsets over mountain ranges, and it feels very big. But that was all free. It was just out there. We just filmed it.
So while you were out there, in Marfa, near Marfa, did you see anything?
We did. Yeah. And so here's the thing about the Marfa lights. They don't work like clockwork. They're not always there. I think atmospheric conditions have something to do with it sometimes, but it's not a sure bet that if you go out to Marfa, you're going to see the Marfa lights. So I didn't have a lot of expectations, but we had one driving shot that we needed to get after dark, and we needed there to be just like lots of space and no light around, just like total darkness. And so I knew from my research that the drive between Alpine and Marfa on the way to the Marfa Lights viewing station would be a great place for this. So we got that shot, and then I was like, hey, we're like a half mile away from the Marfa Lights viewing station. Let's pull over, take a look. And we got out, and the sun was just setting. There's just a little rim of light along the horizon, and there's some people that had been out there like breaking open kegs and stuff. And I think they'd been waiting for a while, and they didn't see anything. So a lot of people were already leaving. They decided the Marfa lights aren't coming out. But I was like, hey guys, we don't have anywhere to be. We're done for the day. Let's chill for a little bit. And sure enough, about 10-15 minutes after a lot of these people had just left, this little orange dot of light showed up on the horizon. And I knew from my research that I did for that TV show that there are no houses out there. There's no highway. It's basically public land. It's state park stuff. So there should not be people, there should not be cars, and there's definitely no houses out there. And as we started to watch this little light kind of rose up and became two. And then they started kind of doing this little like figure eight thing in tandem. And then those two split and became four, almost like cells duplicating. And then we had four lights going like this. And then very suddenly they all just split off different directions and just started like going crazy, just like going everywhere, making huge independent sweeps. One of them started doing a figure eight vertically. They started changing colors to like blue and yellow and red. And we watched this for maybe 30 minutes until they zipped back and kind of went 4, 2, 1, and then flickered out of sight.
You got this on film, right?
Well, no. So here's the thing: is that
the film crew? Come on.
Yeah, I know, right? So here's the thing: is that the only way you can see it really well with your eyes, because our eyes can compensate in ways that film or cameras can't.
Yeah.
The only way to actually capture it is with a really long lens and with a super long exposure video. So people have done this, and it kind of creates light trails when you watch it, almost like shooting a long exposure of stars, and you start to see light trails. But yeah, I mean, we couldn't get our phones, we couldn't get our camera. Like, there's just no way to capture it on the gear that we had. Which is it was kind of fun. It sort of felt like it was just there for us. It was, and if I were to get poetic, it kind of felt like the lights blessing our film. It was kind of like, hey, we're here. We know that you're doing stuff. We know you're talking about us. We're going to do a little stuff for you, but you can't get it on video. If we had like a specialty camera, we could have captured it. But, that's and there is a guy that actually has some permanent cameras out there that he live stream. Well, he doesn't live stream, but he captures all of it to hard drives and then analyzes. But yeah, it was really cool, and no explanation for it. And I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I've never seen anything like that, and it's very strange to see something that you have an arsenal of knowledge to know that it's, not the most explicable things, so if it's not that, what the hell is it?
So what do you think it is?
Oh gosh, I really have no clue. I don't think it's traffic lights, because there, like I said, there's that guy that's had cameras out there for like a decade. He's watched them. I don't think like St. Elmo's fire makes sense, or like swamp gas, because if you see videos of that, they kind of go up and they fizzle out and they're gone really quickly. These things stick around for 30 minutes or longer.
Well, plus the way you're talking about them moving in a pattern, as well.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
of that.
and I mean, it feels kind of intelligent when you watch it. It doesn't. It kind of, to me, it is intelligent as maybe watching like a bug fly around who seems to maybe have its own agenda, but it is sort of just wandering and floating. It's a bit like watching a moth or something. I don't know, man. The low. So here's one thing. So the Apache, they were there first, right? And I don't explicitly know how far back the history goes in that area of the Big Bend, but they call it what do they call it? They call them ghost lights. That's where the term comes from. And their belief is that it is the spirits of their fathers leading them back to the homeland, because of course the Apaches were displaced by the Mexican army, I believe, in like the 1870s. There was a big war that happened with Chief Alzate, and he was kind of a rebel Indian who led a charge against the Spanish, and they were ultimately, or the Mexicans, and they were ultimately captured and executed over across the border. And the folk belief is that these lights are probably the spirits of those people that were killed during the Indian Wars. I'm pretty inclined to have that kind of paranormal belief. I whether it's actual, like cognizant, spirits, or I like the idea that when something really traumatic happens, it can kind of imprint and leave stuff behind, kind of a residue. And I think that makes sense. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 100-200 years, like we don't find the scientific line of inquiry that can kind of show how we do imprint, emotions have physicality and they can imprint stuff on the landscape. So I'm not saying I believe necessarily that's what the ghost lights are, but it seems far more plausible than some of the other stuff that has been thrown out there.
Yeah, I mean, a meteorological event, that would be something that you would expect to be duplicated in other places throughout the world. I mean, there's no place that's singularly unique to a certain square mile radius. Certainly not in West Texas. They're all the same across the plains there. So I don't know why
I mean,
Malpa would be different than El Paso.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, really in Texas, like that's kind of the only spot. The closest that anything else comes to is the Brown Mountain Lights, which I think is in Kentucky, maybe. The difference between the Brown Mountain Lights and the Marfa Lights is that the Brown Mountain area is very wooded. So, it could be happening all the time and you just wouldn't see it. It's very hilly. And, I think what's unique about Marfa is that it's so flat until the horizon where you have the mountains. It's really the perfect theater for this phenomena. So I think it probably does happen else. There are stories of ghost lights in pretty much every culture,
Sure.
but there's really nowhere else in the world where you could like if you hang out for a week in Marfa, you'll probably see the lights. It's that easy to see, as long as you're patient. So,
And like a mirage on the highway, where it's heat, if you try, once you get closer to it, it's gone. It's nothing that you can actually
Correct.
just go out and interact with.
Yeah, well, and the kicker for me though is these few people who have very credible stories in my mind that they have had close encounters with these things. And when I say close encounter, I mean like here, like straight up, and they're massive when they get up and close to you. They're not little orbs. They are beasts in front of you.
Okay.
They kind of look like and we modeled it after in the film. You see a bit of it in the trailer, but we modeled it after some of the witness statements, which is they're almost like little miniature suns put down in front of you, which is just so terrifying. It's just like, well, what is that? I can't even imagine. We have a theory in the film that we put forward that isn't necessarily what I believe, but what I think makes a fun idea.
Speaking of the trailer, why don't we show people?
Yeah.
Assuming we don't get a copyright ding on this, let's show everybody.
No, we will.
Well,
You should be
will.
fine. Yeah, they're posting the trailer everywhere. So
All right, so
no big
here
deal.
is the official trailer of The Ghost Lights.
Such a strange tale. I mean, a man contacts you and says he sees strange lights in the desert, and you drive 600 miles to the very ends of the earth to hear about it in person? It's this place. It's like a magnet.
The funeral is already over. Dad's under 6 feet of dirt, and he has been for 2 days. There wasn't much else. All of his manuscripts and notes have been donated back to the Chronicle. Dad kind of lost it towards the end.
Where's my story, Alexandra?
This is Arthur C. Bennett. Day is October 15th, 1978. What about you, sir?
I have a story to tell, and I intend to tell it all.
You said you saw something very strange out in the desert. Ghost lights.
I'm not the only one that's seen the lights. Everybody here. And if you stay here long enough, you will see the lights too.
I have my story for the magazine.
Daddy, I'm so sorry. You started this story, so I'm gonna finish it.
The locals know. People have been disappearing here for hundreds of years, maybe longer. And it's because of those lights.
Did you tell anyone?
No,
Why?
because people disappear when they get too close to the lights. Those lights are not to be messed with. They're dangerous.
Little green men.
Or something like them.
I'll ask you again, Arthur. What did you see? Oh my God, the light is here.
Bad things happen to those who chase lights.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. and I looked for all sorts of ways to take those little windows off so you could actually see the end of that trailer, but I couldn't find them. Now let me ask you this, Timothy, because we have a man in black show up in this trailer.
Yes. Let's see here.
What's now? Is this part of the lore here? We're getting into our secret agencies and government conspiracies and cover-ups and all of that. Is there an element of that in here?
So there is, yeah, absolutely. You know, and that there's not much to do with the Marfalites in the Men in Black lore. But, you know, part of the big inspiration of this story, and, you know, I always start with nonfiction first. You know, I'll read a lot, whether it's history or, you know, paranormal subject matter stuff. You know, people have written about this. And what, you know, one of the books that was a huge inspiration for me was John Keels' The Mothman Prophecies. And they made a movie off of it, which is kind of like the real story, but it's fictionalized in a lot of ways. Really good movie. I love it. But when you read the book, there's a whole series of chapters about these strange men that are kind of dressing a little bit out of their decade. You know, this was like the late 60s, and they're driving black Cadillacs, you know, from the 40s and like early 50s. They're wearing, you know, more or less kind of like what FBI agents maybe wore in like the 1940s with the black hats and all this. And, you know, what's weird about them, though, and what John Keel talks about is, number one, they didn't have any hair. So like bald, no eyebrows, no facial hair, really pale, smooth skin. And they talked very strangely. They kind of, it's almost like they read a guidebook on how to be human, but didn't really study that well. So there's something off. They're communicating in the way they think you want to hear them, but they're not doing a good job. But what they do is they show up after UFO sightings and basically bully people into silence, or they show up and don't really do much except like make you really scared. So maybe they don't even directly talk about the UFO sighting. They just show up and like say, really weird stuff. Like I'm trying to remember. There's something really weird in the Mothman prophecies where one of them like says, "How was the mustard today?" and then everyone wants to laugh, but this person just like almost like a robot looks at them as if anticipating like a real response to this nonsensical question. So the theory that kind of goes beyond the franchise is that the Men in Black are something else. They're not government. They're not human. And that they have some sort of like almost natural connection to UFO phenomena, so that when a UFO is seen, these things just show up for whatever reason.
Kind of played with that, with those alopecia watchers that they would have show up in the series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dressed in black.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And there's been a few television series that have kind of taken the actual story and kind of run with it. And actually, the newest Project Blue Book series on Amazon, they have some pretty realistic Men in Black in that series. But the Men in Black actually played a lot into like the actual stories that were documented in Project Blue Book. So I don't know. It was just, again, like a very scary thing. When it came down to it, I thought it'd be fun to play it myself. So I shaved my eyebrows off and my goatee and mustache, which I always have. And walked out of the bathroom, and I just looked at my wife wearing that hat with a dead stare, and she went, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And I was like, "Great." It was like, I have to do it now. Like it's the deal is sealed.
So that's you in the black suit in the trailer then.
It is. Yep,
oh,
that's
okay.
me.
All right. I did not recognize you there. That's so well done on that. Now, let me ask you, when you're putting all this together, like you say, there's other incidents, there's other examples of this kind of thing showing up in stories. RJ mentions Fringe, for example. We've got the X-Files, we've got the Twilight Zone, we've got the Outer Limits. Did you ever have a moment when you're putting this thing together that, well, I don't want to copy everybody else? How do you make this a unique story that doesn't feel like it's just another copycat Area 51 type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the decision to make it basically a father-daughter story was first and foremost. I think a lot of sci-fi writers, and there's some people who do really, really well, but when they think about sci-fi, it kind of becomes this big sweeping thing. It becomes really epic. It has a lot of elements to it. It becomes really complicated. It has a jillion different characters who all have their own backstories and cute little quirks that they have to go with. And some people do that really well. Neil Gaiman, for example. That was first and foremost, to me, is not relying on a lot of those tropes. And then, secondarily, I just try not to watch anything, because I got to be careful. If I'm consuming a lot of that content while I'm writing something, it gets in there. I've actually had to do major rewrites on screenplays because I was watching like The Conjuring or something, and I just took The Conjuring and put it into my script without really realizing it until I reread it. So and that's the thing too is I read more than I watch movies, so so there's a lot of this stuff out there that I just don't watch on purpose. And the stuff that I do watch become like my favorite thing, and I'll watch it over and over and over again. But I'm more, literature is more my inspiration than other media. So that kind of saves me a lot. There's a lot of stuff I have seen, but people will say like, "Hey, your movie seems really similar to this," and I'll be like, "That's cool. I haven't seen that." And it's all stuff that's kind of fair game after I make the movie, because then I can watch it and not be influenced by it.
Right. What production?
You mentioned in the. I'm sorry, Jason.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
You mentioned the movie, and I don't know if this is just to kind of drum up tension for the story plot about people disappearing who go looking for the lights.
Right.
Is there any backstory to that, or is that a plot point?
That's more a plot point. Yeah, but here's the thing about Big Bend is that people do go missing there all the time. It is it basically once you get to Terlingua, drive 15, 20 more miles, that's Big Bend National Park. And that extends into the Chihuahuan Desert. And it's probably, if it were a straight shot, it would probably be 200 miles before you met civilization again on the other side of the border. But it's not a straight shot. And it's this, this warren of ravines and mountain ranges and plateaus. And, there's no water out there. And so a lot of people go hiking out there and they don't prepare enough and they just disappear. There's a lot of human smuggling that happens out in Big Bend. There's a lot of drug smuggling. In the 40s, there was a lot of alcohol that was getting pulled over the border. If there's ever been an embargo on anything, that item in the past has become very hot commodity, and people from Mexico will bring it over to the U.S. to help supply and demand. And people have just it's easy to walk one direction and never be seen again. So folklorically that starts to turn into a lot of interesting stuff. There's legends about cursed mines out there and people that have gone out into Big Bend to find a lost gold cache, and maybe they've discovered the mine, but the curse got them and this Apache spirit came and killed them, or there's all kinds of folklore explanations for why people disappear. So a lot of nothing directly connected to the lights, but the idea that you can go missing. I guarantee you there's someone out in Big Bend getting lost right now, because it is not a friendly. It's a beautiful place, you can see. But it's not a friendly place.
Yeah, West Texas is almost a character in and of itself, in terms of what you could find out there, or how you can get lost. Besides Marfa and that area, you have the Odessa Permian Basin. You've got the Salt Flats. So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of desolation out there that I could see a lot of people getting lost out there.
I got lost out there. I went hiking there last year, and there's a canyon called Bruja Canyon. It's called the Witches Canyon, and there's actually some. It's pretty unknown. Not a lot of people know about it. It's not on maps, but there actually are some pretty interesting ghost stories attached to it. And I set out to go find it, and it looked like a 10-minute walk one direction. You could see it in the distance. It turned into an hour walk, and then by the time I got there and realized it was going to get dark soon, I turned around and realized I had no idea how to get back to my car. And I had a compass, so and there's something really awful about that feeling, that sinking feeling of I could die out here,
That's the thing about Texas. The joke goes, it's hey, we're in Europe on vacation, drove an hour over into Germany, then, got in the car for a half hour, we're in France, and then, we were in Switzerland in the afternoon. And the guy says, got in my car, drove 8 hours, still in Texas.
Man, yeah, it's from Dallas to Terlingua, it's just about 800 miles. So, and you're still not out of the state yet. Yeah. It's pretty crazy,
Now, where are you originally from?
I'm from Amarillo area, in the Panhandle. So, and then I moved to DFW to go to film school about 15 years ago.
Oh, okay. So you're still in Dallas then?
I am.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I grew up in Irving, just right outside Big D. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know Irving. Yeah, actually, I live in Denton. So,
okay.
If anyone wants to come hang out on the square and see me, you might see me around.
So you're were you studying film at North Texas then?
I was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you and I might know might have some connections in common. I don't know if Fred Watkins was still teaching up there or not, but yeah, that was an experience. Of course, that was a day or two ago when I was up down there.
Sure.
So-
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure we. I've only been in the area for like 15 years, but I've gotten to know a lot of the people that have been here their whole lives. So it's a cool place. People call it mini Austin, except I feel like that's an insult to Denton. I would call Austin Big Denton.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've been back to Denton. I'm not sure that you could make a solid comparison to Austin, but being a college town, I could see a certain application of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of good music here. I think that's kind of what most people are referring to. So,
all right.
there's 4 or 5 concerts every night here, so it's fun.
So over in our chat, Studio 38 says, I want to see this movie. And we've got Woody over in Critical Blast saying, any solution to Drake's equation doesn't bode well. We were talking about that. I actually have never heard the Nephilim theory, the Marfa sits on a hellmouth story. That one actually is pretty intriguing to me.
Yeah, and I never had before I spoke to that one guy. And I'll be honest, I won't say his name, mostly because he hasn't given me permission, but also because I really want to go probably interview this guy for like a documentary, because his story is very compelling. So yeah, I'd never heard that before, but it's not unusual. The idea of hell mouths are pretty common, and also the idea that there are areas of like high paranormal phenomena. You think of like the Devil's Triangle, and there's Skinwalker Ranch. There's all these places that have UFOs and ghosts and poltergeists and wolf men, and you name it. Like there seems to be places that just have it all. And I don't know that Marfa totally fits that. I think basically they just kind of have the lights, but there's a lot of ghost stories around the area as well. So
yeah, I don't think I've heard
shortage.
I don't think I've heard any Sasquatch stories out there or not, but
no, there is a dinosaur story. Someone claims that they saw a big lizard at one point. So and pterodactyls are seen in Big Bend allegedly. Someone in
now
like
the lights have been explained. That's
they're pterodactyls. They're pterodactyls with flashlights.
That's just tachyon explosions where the past is meeting up with the present.
Oh yeah, that's where it is. You got it explained.
That actually kind of works for a story too, because if you have that, the rips in the space-time continuum. You could do a lot of things with that.
Oh yeah, totally. That's the thing too, is when you go out there, you do start to feel kind of out of time. There's lots of abandoned buildings, at Terlingua, except for like a lot of the trailers that people have built, looks kind of like it did 150 years ago. So, you can look one direction and really feel like you've kind of slipped out of time, out of sequence. So who knows? Maybe there is a hellmouth in the Big Bend. I like that idea a lot. And there's more stories coming out of that, I'm sure.
You do a whole series of them.
Yeah, you could have like an anthology series. Yeah.
Yep. So
Tales of Terlingua.
Oh, copyright.
There you go.
You gotta write that down.
You get that.
I do that all the time.
You get that one for free.
Away.
Yeah.
All right, so Studio 38 says they want to see this movie. We are looking here at spectrographfilms.com, the listing for the Ghost Lights. We'll put all of this in our notes. And it says here where to watch. We've got Apple TV, Amazon, Microsoft Movies, YouTube Movies, and Google Play Movies. So how do people watch this? Is this a rental, or is this free to anybody who wants to click on the link or what?
Yeah, so we're kind of releasing in stages. So for the time being, it's a rent buy. And honestly, this is really good for us as filmmakers. I am personally in debt with this movie. And any indie filmmaker, this is the case. Where none of us are independently wealthy. If we were, we would not be independent filmmakers.
Right.
And the rent buy really helps us out. We get a big share of that. But within the next probably 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be releasing on platforms like Tubi. It's actually going to release on YouTube through Kings of Horror coming up in October. And all of that's going to be like AVOD, which is like advertised based. So you watch, and like every 15 minutes, it'll show you 1 or 2 ads. So that, honestly, I don't think that's the best way to absorb it, because it breaks up your viewing experience. But it's a good way, because anyone can watch it that way. So I'm excited for that availability coming soon. But yeah, for now, like the easiest thing, you got a remote with a little speaker into it. Say, play the Ghost Lights, and Amazon will pull it right up for you.
All right.
Speaking as you're doing these independent films and it's your own money going into it. One of the things we do on Critical Blast almost all the time is talk to people who make things through crowdfunding. Has that ever been something that you've considered taking advantage of to build something up, or have you already and you're still working with the budget you have?
Yeah. So I hate crowdfunding. I do it a lot, but I hate it because I hate asking people for money. And honestly, it's a big drag to put together, and it's stressful, but it works. So I didn't want to do that for production. Primarily, because we were hot in the middle of the pandemic and no one had money anyway. No one had jobs, and so if I was going to risk anybody's cash, I want it to be my own. However, when we got into editing, we actually did do a Indiegogo for the Ghost Lights to pay for editing, for original soundtrack, some of the special effects. We were able to raise money that way. And as much as I hate it, it's really good for building an audience, because you send your avid fans start to come out of the woodwork, and then they become people that you can share the movie with afterwards, and then the next project that's already happening. We have new movies that are in development right now, and those people are already dialed into what we're doing. So it's good and bad.
Well, you've got
in a perfect world, I would either use my own cash, or there would be some gazillionaire that would just write me a check. But in the meantime, we'll
with a crowdfunding
ask for help.
With a crowdfunding project, though, you've got now the people who have put money into this. You have a built-in team of ambassadors. These are people.
Yes.
Now they have a vested interest in this movie succeeding because they're a part of it. They have some ownership. They've got some skin in the game, as it were. So those are the people that you sit there and go, okay, the movie's done. Go share it with the world. Go tell people about it. So I can understand the frustration behind doing the crowdfunding and that whole I hate asking for money type of thing. I'm the same way. If it were me, I'd just write a check or something and pay for it myself. But there's pros and cons to all of those things, I guess. So.
But you know what? The bigger films in Hollywood, they do the same thing. They just throw parties to ask for money.
That's true.
Go up to producers and say, "Hey, I want to do this thing. I've got JD on board. I've got Sally Struthers is going to do it. I think she's dead. I don't know. But I'm just trying to pull out random names.
Given
what do you say,
technology,
JB? You want to write us a check and be a producer on this?
RJ, given digital technology,
it's all about your sphere of influence, in Hollywood. As an indie filmmaker, you've got to work your way up into that sphere. Very few of us are born into that world that's very exclusive.
Yeah. All right, the website spectrographfilms.com. They're also on Twitter under spectro_films. We'll put links in all of this. The movie is being distributed through Terror Films, and you can find them on there as well. The trailer is out there on YouTube, so you can go find that. And like I said, we'll put links and everything. Timothy, what have you got coming up next? You say you're working on a story. What's next for you? You going back for the Marfa documentary, or you got something else?
Oh man, I want to. I do, but it costs so much money just to get the almost 800 miles over there. So that we'll do probably a free to watch short film around that at some point. But right now we actually have, and people can see on the website on spectrographfilms.com, our next project, which is almost done editing, and we'll probably go into the film festival circuit late this year to early next year, is a action comedy called Dead Hand. So it's kind of in the vein of like a really good Bruce Lee movie. So the entire leading cast are all martial artists. So, and very good actor as well, but it's just jam packed with really good like hand-to-hand combat. And there's a good and people can watch the trailer there. I think that's probably for our Indiegogo that we wrapped up for that one. But basically, two guys are trying to save the world from a doomsday nuclear device that is in the hands of a terrorist. So kind of, that's not my personal project. I'm producer on that. John Francis McCullough, my co-producer, that's his film. And so that'll be coming out soon. And then, of course, I have more screenplays that I've got in the bag. And I've actually got one of them kind of up on like a cork board right here that I'm working on writing. So yeah, several stuff. We're still waiting on that big one that's going to help us make the $1 million picture. So if you're out there and you want to help a guy out, let me know.
I have frequently made the joke. We haven't really mentioned him in a long while. When we first started, and especially when we first started getting into the YouTube aspect of things, we would frequently make reference to Rich Uncle Otto, who was out on walkabout, because Rich Uncle Otto was not here to give us money. It was just it would be nice if Rich Uncle Otto would come back and give us this. So I totally empathize with you. I can get that. So all right, sir.
But we do feel the next film is going to be a pretty big project. So look out for it. It's big things on the horizon.
Oh, well, good luck with that, Timothy Stevens. The movie is The Ghost Lights, and it's out there now. We'll put links and everything in the notes. And next project, we'll have you back, and we'll talk more, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right, and thanks all of you for being here and being a part of the experiment that we do here between our channel and RJ's channel. It's always a fun experience. So we will do this again. We know not when, but we'll let you know. So connect with us on all the social medias. You can find Critical Blast. You can find Sci-Fi for Me, and I guess that's it. So
cool.
All right. Thanks very much
guys.
for being here, folks. Have a good night.
You too.
Hope you had a blast.